Okay, let's get started and look at how to set up the sonar. So I've got my sonar module here. I've got my Arduino Uno. So I just put that to one side for now. And of course I have the breadboard. So let's take a look at this sonar. Just going to flip it over and let's look at these 4 pins. So I've got my ground, of course, my echo and trigger and VCC. Now VCC is for the power, trigger sends out the pulse, and echo receives the pulse. If I look at the front, you can usually see, so on here it's marked T, trigger, and R, so I think that stands for receiver, but on the pins that's labelled trigger and echo. So I'm going to plug this into the breadboard. Now for the Jenga game, it works well if it's kind of in the centre of the board or somewhere near the centre. It doesn't really matter where you put it. So I've plugged mine in there, and I'm going to start by wiring up the power. Now making sure I've got it nice and lined up here. Of course you can put it into any of these as long as it's lined up with the VCC pin, but just to keep things so that I can see them clearly, I'm going to put it at the end here. So that's that plugged in, and then over on my Uno board, this is the section I'm interested in here, the power section, and it's the 5 volt that I want to use, 5 volt, just there. So I'm plugging this into the 5 volts. Okay, so that's going from 5 volts to VCC on the sonar. So next, to deal with the power part of the sonar, I'm going to do the ground. So over on the other end, I'm going to make sure it's all nice and lined up there, lined up with the ground pin, and I'm going to put that into the ground port that's next to my 5 volt. So I'm going to put it just in here to ground. So wire just going to go over there and put it into the ground port. Okay, so I've got my 5 volt red wire and ground, this green wire, leading to my ground here and VCC on the sonar. So that deals with the power. Next stage are these echo and trigger pins, and they will go into my digital ports over this side of the Uno. Now it doesn't really matter where you put them, you just have to know where you've put them when it comes to doing the code later. So for my code, to match the code that I've already done, the trigger, that's this one, so the trigger is going to go into number 10. So I'm just going to find 10 on here. So that's my trigger. Again, it doesn't matter which number you use, you just have to know later on in the code, and we'll look at that in a later video. And finally, my echo. So that's the remaining pin here, echo, and I'm going to put that into 9, just because it's next to the 10, really. Keep things simple. And that's the sonar set up and ready to use. Of course, it won't do anything yet till we get some lights and a buzzer connected to it, but that's basically how to wire up the sonar.